But where did the term Anglo-Saxon come from? Well, the term were first used to describe the many Germanic folk arriving in Britannia, though it wouldn't have been a proper collective term back then. Bede, for example, used the terms Anglorum and Saxonum. Anglorum or Anglicus were just one of many umbrella terms used at the time to talk about who we now call the Anglo-Saxons, to set them apart from the Celtic Britons. Plenty of folk wrongly reckon the term were made up in the 18th or 19th century, and that it were never used in its own time. That's a straight up lie. The term Anglo-Saxon were also used outright, same as we use it today. Some clear-cut examples of this are, during King Edwig's reign in 956, there's the Latin abbreviation Anglo-Su, which stands for Anglo-Saxonum. The OU were a commonly used Latin abbreviation for Anglo-Saxonum, and that's the Latin word for Anglo-Saxon. Here it's used in a charter, an official royal document granting land or rights to a church or noble. The one from 956 showed not just political stuff, but also how folk at the time used terms like Anglo-Su. This is a good example because here it's used in the context of as an ethnic group. Alfred the Great used the title Rex Saxonum when he were King of Wessex, meaning King of the Saxons. But after he took London in 886, his title changed to Rex Anglo-Saxonum, meaning King of the Anglo-Saxons United. Edward the Elder also used the same Rex Anglo-Saxonum title. Then Aethelstan, after uniting all the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms, used Rex Anglorum, meaning King of the English. That title were only used by kings who ruled over a fully united England. This shows a clear progression in how power and identity were expressed. The shift in titles from Rex Saxonum to Rex Anglo-Saxonum, and then to Rex Anglorum, demonstrates how the idea of a unified Anglo-Saxon people, and later a single English kingdom, developed over time. It proves that these terms weren't just poetic or symbolic. They were used in real political contexts to reflect changing ideas of unity, ethnicity, and rulership. It also proves up that Anglo-Saxon weren't some modern invention, it were a recognised and official term used by kings themselves. This was now most likely used to tell the Anglo-Saxons apart from the Viking newcomers, who were themselves also Germanic. Angles, Saxons and English all meant different things at this point. Saxons meant folk from round Wessex, Angles meant folk from round Mercia, Anglo-Saxons meant Wessex and Mercia joined up. English meant all the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms together. Over time, from the Norman invasion, the English language changed, and by the 1500s, English had taken over from the older term Anglos and other versions. Though other nations still called the English Anglish or Saxon, this change only happened in the English language. Angles, Saxons and English were by this point all just different words for the same thing. From around the 1900s, the term Anglo-Saxon started being used just for the original English settlers, more as an academic and historical term, even though the Anglo-Saxons and the English were basically the same folk. By this point, the term, though standardised, had taken on less of an ethnic meaning and more of a historical and cultural one, to mark the difference between the original and modern English people. Around the same time, British folk started settling all over the world, but there was no British passport or set nationality. Everyone were just seen as equal British subjects of the crown. So the use of Anglo-Saxon, or the still commonly used Anglos, came to mean the English migrants and settlers from Britain who went to places like the USA and Australia, more as an ethnic or racial identity. This shift happened due to a growing racial view of the world, and some uses of the term from that time would now be seen as racist. Some folk still hold on to that, thinking themselves a superior people, but they're a minority. Just because you use a term don't mean you're endorsing every way it's ever been used. So the man on the street would have still used the term in a racial sense, while the academics were using it more as a historical one. Anglo-Saxon is, in the modern day, used both as a historical term for the first English settlers and as an ethnonym, much like how the word Arab is used. For example, the term Anglo-Saxon model doesn't just mean the economic model of England, but includes the United States, Canada, New Zealand, Australia, the UK and Ireland. It shows a mix of an academic jargon and ethnonym rolled into one. That's why the term Anglo-Saxon or Anglo can be mistaken as racist, and why some folk are trying to rename or even get rid of the academic use of the term Anglo-Saxon when talking about the early English settlers. This isn't helped by how differently the terms are used in Britain itself compared to places like America or Australia. In Britain, Anglo-Saxon is seen as a useful historical term, and also as a sort of ethnic one. But abroad, where folk don't get taught much about the Anglo-Saxons in a historical sense, it's more often taken as a racial term. A lot of the people who've got a problem with the term Anglo-Saxon tend to be very anti-English or against the British Empire, and look at it through more of an identity politics lens, more so than with any real local arguments. To make things even more muddled, plenty of English folk are now starting to call themselves Anglo or Anglo-Saxon again online, especially in places like the USA and Australia, as a way to hold on to their English heritage. So just like I might call myself British English, meaning I'm loyal to the UK but racially English, others might say Anglo-Canadian, meaning they're loyal to Canada, but racially English since the word English often brings to mind the nation of England, not the ethnic group. To make things extra complicated, English people in England are also reusing the term to hold on to their indigenous status to England due to mass migration, where many random people around the world are calling themselves English without any real ties to the land. People all around the world use ethnonyms to link themselves to their ancestors. There's nothing strange about that. For example, many Chinese still call themselves Huns, and plenty of South Africans still call themselves Zulu. The term Anglo-Saxon could be used as an ethnonym for folk with British ancestry, since English, Irish, Scottish and Welsh people all carry a mix of Anglo-Saxon and Celtic British DNA due to generations of interbreeding. Still, I reckon a new term like Anglo-Briton or Anglo-Celtic might work better as an ethnonym. That said, most folk already know what Anglo-Saxon means, and it's usually only the condescending sort who like to nitpick the term anyway, so they can just be ignored. Be sure to check out my other channel, History Sticks, for the complete, longer and comprehensive video.